Okay, so this is walkthrough number 2, which is going to be looking at question 1 on the reading paper. Everything we're going to be referring to on here comes from the November 2014 paper, so if you've got the question paper and the insert handy, that's going to help you a lot. So, if we move straight on, then I'm going to have a look at the question. So question 1 will always be on source 1 from your insert, as you can see. Just to avoid any confusion, they even tell you what that is. So you should be looking at the newspaper article with the headline "Children are sent to school too young in the UK." Similarly, the question will always be phrased in the same terms, so you can expect to see the question there that says, "What do you understand from the article about?" and then whatever the topic is for that particular year. So if you think about what this question is asking you to do, the 3 big things you've got to remember is the focus of the question, which is all about being able to talk about what's inferred and suggested, the idea of reading between the lines, and then you're also being asked to kind of summarise and pull out main points. You've only got 8 marks on this, and if we work on the idea that for every mark you've got about 2 minutes, you should be kind of working around about the 15-16 minute marks for this. In terms of amount, we'd say, and as an idea, we'd like 3 developed paragraphs. However, what we would like you to do is you kind of write up to the 15 minutes, and whatever you've got at that point is what you've got. And it's really important that you stick to your timings above all else, that you move on. You shouldn't be stealing minutes from other questions, otherwise you're going to find yourself in a real mess when you get towards the end of the exam. So you stick to 15 minutes. So, thinking about what we're going to do with that insert, the 2 big things we want to do for each question is we're going to highlight things, and then we're also going to annotate them. If you don't annotate, you just highlight, you're effectively colouring in, and that's not the most helpful thing you can do in the most important exam of your life. So, we say that highlight, what we'd look for is a little bit of highlighting for this first question. We want to pull out three ideas. The question is very general. It says, what do you understand? And so all you need to be able to pull out is 3 points that are made within that text. So we'd like to pull out 3 points that link to the question, and we'd also like to space them evenly through the text to prove to the examiner that you've read the whole thing. Once you've got those quotations selected, what we suggest you do then is write a couple of points about them. And again, you're thinking about what they imply and what they suggest. Now, to see how this works, we're going to have a look at the second paragraph in the article. This one here that begins "in most European countries." For me, what I've done then is I've taken my point that's made there is that top one, that in most European countries, children usually start formal education at 6 to 7 rather than 4 to 5 in the UK. So I've pulled that out as one of the points I want to make, and what I've also done then off the back of it is I've thought about what that implies and what that suggests. And what I've thought of is those 3 points there. It suggests that the UK is a very different approach to the majority of developed countries. I've also looked and thought, well, since it says the UK is on its own, it implies that the rest of Europe is ahead of us and we're falling behind. Then I looked again a little bit closer at language, and I've said that the comparison of 4 to 5 with 6 to 7 show that these differences are quite large. We're not just a little bit out in Europe, we're doing something completely different. So I've got my quotation, which I've selected, and then I've come up with 2 or 3 ideas. I need to find 3 of those through the article. There will be about 20, 25 even possible answers, so you don't need to stress about what you've chosen, whether it's right or not. It probably will be. But you're just trying to pick things that are spaced out and that allow you to do some kind of suggestion and implication off the back of it. If you're struggling with that, then there's some extra help here in green. If you're really struggling to find points, then usually looking at the paragraphs and selecting something from the first sentence will serve you well. And again, similarly, if you are struggling, look at the first and then look at the last paragraph, because strong articles tend to put their best points there. And if you're looking at annotation and having trouble with that, then you want to be thinking about what they call hints at, or if you're really struggling, you can do like a literature keyword analysis. So what does this particular word suggest? Is a good way into it. Anyway, so now we've got our quotation, that's there. We're going to think about how we're going to write these up. Now, with 15 minutes to write, and some of that time already spent on finding quotations, you've only got perhaps 3 or 4 minutes to write a very, very quick P paragraph. I'm going to go through it quite slowly here, and I'll end up with something quite chunky, but you don't need to worry if yours is a little bit shorter than that. So you start with quotation, and then your point is simply that quotation summarised in your own words. And then your evidence should just be you writing up those notes, that annotation you've got on your insert. And again, we're looking for 2 to 3 ideas, and you're going to use words like suggests and implies to prove to the examiner that you are reading between the lines. How that works in practice then, if we see our quotes summarised, I will go with something like this. The one thing I will point out to you is words like firstly, secondly, also. Those kind of little linking words, what we call discourse marks, are particularly useful. It shows the examiner that you're organised, that you know what you're talking about. So I've got firstly one thing I understand from the article, and again I'm just rephrasing the words from the question, is there differences between how English schools approach education compared to the rest of Europe. I've then gone on to embed my quote. As can be seen in the article where it states, in most European countries, children usually start formal education at 6 to 7 rather than 4 to 5. If we then look how I might try and develop that with an explanation, what we've got then is this suggests that the UK has an attitude to education which is out of step with similar countries. Additionally, and again I'm using those kind of discourse markers to show where I'm adding ideas, it implies that as a nation we are falling behind our neighbours as our view of education is so different. To emphasise this, the broad gap between 4 to 5 and 6 to 7 further suggests, and again using the words like suggests, implies, that it's not just a minor difference but a completely different approach. For me, if you could produce something of that quality, that length, you'd do very, very well indeed. And if we think about the kind of ratio between point, evidence and explanation, we're still looking for more explanation than we are anything else. Although it doesn't have to be anywhere near as developed as it was for English literature. And again, thinking about those keywords, those bits and pieces that you can steal up onto your own answers, the stuff there that's underlined is the kind of thing I'll be wanting to see. So a clear discourse marker at the beginning, a rephrasing of the question to get your point going, and then that kind of embedded quotation, and then the language of suggestion, implication, emphasis down here. So that's how to answer question 1. If you do have any problems, you can of course click on the Ask Nev section of the website. I encourage you to do that, or Nev does get very bored if no one speaks to him. Good luck, and let me know how you get on.